for the mix-up being in different places, but glad that you all passed the first test and you've made it here. So that's a good test. I think we'll just wait a couple of moments. Is that right, Katrina? Do you want to...
Yeah, we'll wait a little bit longer, still waiting for a few people. And with the last minute tech issues, give people a few minutes grace to get themselves sorted.
I've always felt there should be a word, a description in the dictionary for that piece that's the slightly waiting uncomfortably at the beginning of a Zoom meeting when no one quite knows what to say or not, or music or what have you. They just whitter away to fill that space. It's slightly uncomfortable, isn't it? But anyway.
Kat, you might want to just mute yourself because you can hear a bit of background noise from
me.
Yeah, you're in the busy Pleasance, you can't help it.
Do people all know each other on the call, Katrina? Or people know each other that are here?
I think a lot of people will know each other, know of each other. There's a few staff members here, so everyone will know at least one person, hopefully. Okay, I reckon we're at 4 minutes past. Let's kick off, and then if anyone kind of comes in afterwards, then they can just join. Thank you everyone for making the time today. We are very pleased to have Sue Anstiss with us, who is going to chat a little bit through networking and making the most of your network and the power of your network. We just had a little conversation there beforehand, and we've sorted out Sue with a networking contact already for another project she's doing. So it's happening live before you. Just before you joined. But yeah, thanks so much for joining today. If you want to keep your cameras on, that'd be great. It's always nice for presenters to be talking to a face. But if you could just keep mics off for now, just so we've not got any background noise, that would be great. But yeah, if you want to ask any questions at any point, I'll let Sue let you know how she'd prefer for you to do that. There will be a bit of time for questions at the end. So do feel free to keep them to the end if you prefer. All right, Sue, I'll let you kick off.
Lovely, thank you so much. And do use the chat function as well too, if you feel as we're going through, if you've got questions, I'll try and kind of read and talk too, but we'll definitely, I've got a couple of questions for you as we go through. It's not too interactive, but I would, yeah, kind of like some of your thoughts and feedback too. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and we'll kick off. I've got quite a lot to get through in the next hour, but I will, as I say, I'll move on through, but take your questions too. Let me just make sure we're all set up here. I'm conscious that I'm also opening the door if people are coming in late, so I don't want to not let people in. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the power of networking. I'm a bit passionate about networking myself over the whole of my career, and today I'm going to talk to you, I've kind of divided it into two. So I'm going to talk to you about the power of networking in person, and again, without knowing too much of all of your backgrounds, but for the majority that are athletes attending events, so you may be attending events as you're speaking and presenting events, or you're just attending events either as an athlete or within the kind of different context. It's a real opportunity to make the most of your presence there. And also, I think I'm going to go on to then talk about LinkedIn and profile from a technology point of view of how you can make the most of those networks. I think as an athlete now, you're in this fantastic position that you do have, you know, you may not be massively well known, but the fact is that you are an athlete, you stand out apart from others that might be at events, others that might be online. And though it can be a challenge in terms of the time to invest in this, it's just such a fantastic opportunity for you in terms of potentially finding sponsors, finding potential work in the future. So making those connections for the future. And similarly, say it's not all monetary, but it may be in terms of media coverage, it may be speaking opportunities, it may be in terms of agents, just getting yourself out there and known. I think it can be hugely, hugely powerful. And the more that you can do now and begin to build that network, the more powerful it will be in the future. And we do work with lots of athletes, and I do recognize you're busy people. You know, for many people, it's, you know, whether it's full time or even more so if you're a dual trying to juggle working and training too, you may not feel that you've got the time to invest in this. But actually spending some time, especially building your LinkedIn profile and that network in a business network, rather than perhaps, or in addition to, working on Twitter and Instagram and so on, but building that business connection can really help you in the longer term in terms of finding connections for job opportunities too. So I guess almost just to set the scene at the beginning as to why I think this is so important for athletes and sometimes overlooked, but those that do and do a good job of it can really benefit moving forwards. Too many little screens open here. Let me just move that there. So in terms of connections and what we mean by that network and connections, I came across this quite recently, actually, this idea of the different levels of your network and connections. And on the outside, we've got the unfamiliar people that you might just be in the same room as or come across or are on the same social media platform as you. So you don't really know them. They might be names. They may just be LinkedIn connections, people that you've connected to or you've given a business card to in the past, or you've met at an event, but you don't really know them and what they're doing. And then the next inner circle is almost those where you might recognize their name, you might know who they are. It's comes at that second level. The two in between are almost the most important. So that intimate connection of someone that you do know well, that you might be able to help them in some way, that you can support each other. And the really meaningful connection, the people where you are going to, it's a real reciprocity. So you're giving stuff to them, there's a benefit to both parties, and you're really working and supporting each other. And I would say the meaningful connections are probably, if I think about the network that I have within the world of sport, there probably are maybe 50 or so really powerful, meaningful connections who, if they said to me, can you help with this, or there's an opportunity here, you'd absolutely drop everything to help them. And I think what we're trying to do often is get those unfamiliar or familiar contacts that are just loose connections that we have towards the middle. So building up those connections and that relationship with them too. I was interested to know what you don't like. I mean, maybe you love networking. People often say that no one likes walking into a room full of strangers. I actually quite like the networking, but there is something very intimidating of walking into a room full of people that you don't know, and that's whether it's on a social party basis or more likely at a business event or gathering of some kind. So I'm kind of interested to know, I won't put you on the spot to put into the chat function of what you don't know, but I think for many people it is that discomfort of walking into somewhere where you're not known, where you need to make your way through, build some connections too, and that can be really uncomfortable. One of the things I think is hugely valuable in terms of ahead of going to events, and again, these could be, I'm conscious there could be events where you're speaking or you're just attending, but perhaps as your career progresses, it may be that you are then attending more industry events and conferences and so on. The preparation before attending is so key to make it an easier experience that you'll get more from as well too. So putting some work in ahead of just rocking up at an event can make a huge difference. We don't use business cards as much as we used to actually, and COVID's paid that a little bit. I think that people are using business cards much less than they had been in the past, but there is something to be said by having an up-to-date card, even with your contact details with you as an athlete. And I know again, I'm not sure what's done in terms of if you're working with agents for your own self personally, but it is definitely worth. There's some amazing print companies now, Moo and others that don't charge much. You can make your own business cards, but having something to hand out to people with your details on and contact details and connections is a really good way is to remind people of who you are and to go away there. There are some really lovely apps now as well, where you can just show a QR code and people can scan it and it takes them to your LinkedIn profile and makes that connection that way in a more digital fashion. But definitely having something, preparing something before you go to an event can be really powerful. I think also looking at delegate lists, I do this a lot before I go to events, if I can do, is ask people who's going to be there. I didn't go yesterday actually, but I was meant to be down at Bristol at the football for the Arnold Clark Cup last night. But I would always ask the person that's invited me, and I'm hosted, I'm going to be in a a lovely in a box, it's all very nice, but I want to know who's in there before I get there, so I can go and just look at them on Google. I can link into them before I get there. So kind of building that connection before you walk into the room, it makes you feel a bit more relaxed, but then you know who you're looking out for, and people know if they're looking out for you too. So I guess I think that's so important in terms of getting more from the event that you're attending, but it does take time, and it does take, and I don't, you don't do it all the time, because it does take more time to do that, to think about that. But actually, if you can ask, you can see a delegate list, or who's attending. Even when I'm invited to something and there's sometimes there's a CC on an Outlook invitation, you can see the people that are there. I will just go and connect with them beforehand, just to connect on LinkedIn, again, just to make it easier, so you've kind of started that connection before you meet them in person. And again, I think it's, more and more we're seeing event apps that are developing at conferences and events and so on. So it might be you're coming to this event and they'll say, sign up for this app beforehand. I shouldn't say, this is a great thing to do. I don't often have the time to do it, to go through and look at who else is there. But if you can do, again, when you're then walking into a room, you kind of know roughly who you want to approach, why you might want to approach them, and a little bit about yourself. So it's populating that app with an image and a little bit of content about yourself too. They are really, really valuable if you put the work in on that side. I think one of the things that's really important, and this is very much as an athlete going to an event, is knowing your elevator pitch. And I do a lot of work within the Women's Sport Collective, working with women going into networking events. And we talk about that elevator pitch of how you describe yourself. And it might vary depending on what event you're at or the purpose of your being at that event. But just being clear of how you describe yourself, because I think it is easy, again, as an athlete, just to say my name's this and I do this, but there's probably much more about you than that, and what you might be interested in, why you're attending the event too. So I think thinking and prepping a little bit before you go in terms of who you are and what you're there for also gives you that confidence when you're going in what might be a daunting experience, if you know a little of how you're going to describe yourself when you're introduced to people. So I guess you get to the event itself. I think setting some realistic expectations, and it is good to have some goals. So not to say, I can remember years ago, we used to go to big industry events with my kind of team. I used to run a sports PR agency, and it was almost like having the target of the number of business cards they would get, or the number of people they would go and meet and make contact with. So I think having some targets is a good way to, even if you just set them for yourself, to say, I'm going to go and meet 5 new people when I'm at this event, I'm going to meet 3 new people, but realistic expectations, and probably better to have 2 or 3 really great conversations and connections with people than feel you're going to walk into a room and you need to get around and meet 20 people during the afternoon that you're there. So I think setting some realistic expectations can really kind of help you to have something as an ambition to go out and achieve, but yeah, be realistic with that. I put this picture in here. I did realise, I look at it again, there's lots of bald white men in that photograph, isn't there? But it is a bit of the stuff of nightmares. Walking into a room, you don't know anybody in that room, and everybody in that room seems to know other people, and they're all talking to each other. And I'm sure we've all been there at one point or another, where, how do you break into those conversations? And it may be easier if you're a keynote speaker, or you're the person that's the guest of honor at an event. It might be easier. If you're well known, it might be easier because people know who you are and maybe want to come and talk to you. But when that isn't the case, it can be quite uncomfortable at networking events to go and begin that conversation and to work your way into that group when you're kind of hovering on the side and waiting to come in to a conversation. And so I've worked in sport for 30 years. I love networking. I go to lots of events. I still find it quite uncomfortable sometimes to be in a venue. It's quite a busy venue, lots of people talking. You almost want to hover. You don't quite want to barge your way into conversation. So I absolutely recognise it can be really difficult and uncomfortable. I guess one of the key things to remember is that it's the same for everybody that's there, that nobody, rarely would people feel completely comfortable that everyone's going to gravitate to them and come and talk to them. And just to remember, if you are one of the people that's in one of those groups, in those tight-knit little groups talking there, to recognise the people who are on the outside. I think even as you look at this picture, you can see a guy up in the top left looking at his phone. The people that are trying to look busy but aren't quite included in the conversation, actually you can play a part to make people feel included and to bring people into the conversation and to make people feel warm and welcomed and introduced. So I think it's a bit about what we do for ourselves, but also what we can do for other people. This is often the point where people disappear off to the loo, or you go and check your phone, or you go and make yourself busy somewhere else. But nice to include people where we can too. One of the recommendations I give is to try and use the context of the event itself. So again, easy to just kind of come in and make sure you're going to try and make those connections, but thinking about the event itself. Arriving early, I think, is a huge benefit, is to be there, to be one of the first there, so that you can feel comfortable in that environment, and then also be the one that's welcoming as others come in. It's really hard, much harder and more daunting to walk into a really busy room where you feel like everybody's already connected and deep in conversation. So definitely, if you can to try and get there early, I do think that makes a big difference to your own confidence in making the most of an event. And then to use some of the assets of the event itself. So definitely in terms of the queues, often we're in a queue, you might be queuing to get in, to register for an event, to leave a coat in a cloakroom, queuing for coffee, queuing for lunch. But talking to the people in front and behind you, perhaps rather than looking at your phone or looking down, can be a great way just to begin to make those connections. And then if you want to carry on the conversation with them, you can take your coffee, your drink, and go and talk with them. And if you don't, that's also, it's a great way to have a short interaction and move on without feeling the need to have a full conversation. And I'm going to come on in a moment. Sometimes that's the hardest part, is you get into a conversation with somebody. It's quite hard to move on when you've, recognized that you've had enough of that conversation, or you want to move on, talk to others too. So I think definitely utilizing the elements around the event can be really useful in terms of just those light conversations. And if you find somebody that's really fascinating, then obviously continue that conversation with them. Similarly, I would always say, when you go into a conference or an event, go and sit in a busy row. Find a row that's busy. Don't sit alone on your own. Again, it's for many of us on a human nature, it's that temptation, or there's a whole load of tables with people sat at them. I'm going to go and sit at a table over the back. There's nobody on that table. Actually, go and sit on a busy table. It's a great way. If you think about the fact that you are trying to gather some of those contacts and connections, then being close to people, sitting with people is a really good way to do that, where you won't feel that you're stuck with them forever, but they, who knows the benefit they might bring to you. Also, social media is hugely powerful. So I'm going to come on to talk about LinkedIn in just a moment, but using the social media that's around an event or conference or event that you're attending. It could be a competition, it could be a conference too. So often events now will, obviously many have kind of hashtags or links and connections for the event too. So following those, interacting with people, other speakers that might be at an event, other attendees on the event. So I'll often sit in a conference as I'm listening to someone talking, and I'll be checking the hashtag for the event, looking at the people that are also commenting and connecting with them. So building connections with people in the room by using the social media that's there. And I think that's obviously something that wasn't there 10, 15 years ago, but it's a great way to build some of those connections too. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the hardest things I think is almost how you approach people. So the initial conversation with people, and a lot of that would depend on your personality and how confident you are in talking and sharing. And also then the moving away from people after, when you've had that conversation, how you politely move on without getting stuck with somebody that you might not want to be stuck with for the whole of an event. And I think that is easily done. I do love this whole kind of idea of the offer and ask, that it's not really about going to an event and thinking about what can that I mean, clearly that is at the back of your mind, is can this person be of use to me in the future? I may not know that now, but is it a worthwhile connection that might bring value to me in some way? But actually it's coming into it and approaching it as what you can give to that person. I think that's, for me, with all the years of networking that I've done over time, it's about thinking about what the value that you add to those people, rather than immediately thinking about you're selling, I'm looking for a sponsor, I'm looking for some media coverage, I'm looking for a job in the future. Actually thinking about what you can offer, whether that's introductions or just asking questions to find out more about the people that you're talking to. So I do love this quote in terms of David Ogilvy's very famous marketeer, but if you want to be interesting, you need to be interested. And I really feel that's so true. It's true on social media as well, actually. You know, nobody wants to be following the person that's constantly shouting and boasting about themselves. People want to be engaged and entertained, and people love talking about themselves. They love sharing information too. So I think that's kind of one of the key things I would always say for networking is asking questions and interacting, and being interested in the people that you're talking to rather than just talking about yourself. And again, this may seem really obvious, but often not done. But that whole eye contact, retaining eye contact, you know, a positive handshake. One of my real pet hates is talking to people at events and then they're kind of talking to you and they're looking over their shoulder at somebody else that might be, you know, who's coming in, who might be more interesting. And I think it's really easily done where you're talking to somebody, but somebody catches your eye and you're looking around. You know, I think we can all do it, but actually there's nothing more powerful than giving somebody your attention and focusing on your attention on them. And actually, if you want to then go off and talk to the people, that's fine. But while you're talking to that person, positive interaction, you know, maintaining eye contact, not looking around elsewhere, can be so powerful, and I think is so important. And then there's the really hard bit of how you go, yeah, thanks so much, that, you know, it's been nice to talk to you, but how do you move on? And again, I'm sure we've all found ourselves in this situation, whether that's in a work environment or socially at parties, where you're going to start talking to somebody and actually you're kind of ready to move on, and many will use the toilet excuse, or I'm going to go and get another drink, or I'm just going to move along, but how to kind of exit from that conversation, but leave a positive impression, and maintain that connection without, you know, distressing people really. So I have found, and I've, you know, kind of try this myself, actually it is possible to do in terms of a handshake, really nice to meet you, thanks so much, you know, I hope I'll follow up, or something positive about what they've shared, or hope to see you later. So I think it is incumbent on you to almost take that effort to leave a positive impression, but sometimes you just need to think about it and to practice that process of moving on, without it being uncomfortable or embarrassing, or finding yourself stuck with somebody for an hour where actually you do want to go and circulate too. So something worth practicing, and it can be done, but I absolutely recognize it's not always the easiest thing to do. And when we talk to people about networking, that is something they often struggle with, is the first how to get into the group and be part of the conversation, and then it's how to extricate yourself and move off onto something else too. So kind of a really polite thanks so much, been really lovely to talk to you, and a handshake can be a great way to move on. And then in terms of what you do with those contacts, as people that you've met, you know, and especially if you meet lots of people, it can be hard to remember who you've spoken to and the connections that you've made. So where possible, I would say make a small note. And again, if you've got business cards, it's really easy to make a little bit more note about that person. If there's anything you've learned about that person, if there's anything that will be useful as a prompt for the future, follow up with them on LinkedIn. And again, I'll often come back for an event, I'll have lots of business cards, I'll have lots of names, and spend the time linking into people, following them on Twitter, maybe without being stalky. You know, if you're going to drop them an email, or you can follow up in person. And I guess it's just that balance of building a connection, but just meeting somebody isn't enough if you then don't follow up with them in some way too. So I would definitely recommend, it's kind of like needing to work at it to make it work for you. But the work that you do now will be massively valuable in the future. As you build those connections, it will really, really help you moving forwards too. So that quickly following up too. So in terms of the in-person bit, and I'm going to go on to talk now about LinkedIn, it does lead into that, because I almost feel the LinkedIn piece is when you then meet people in person, or having met people in networks and events and conferences and so on, you can then link into them afterwards. But definitely some of the preparation, and it can be slightly painful and it takes time to do, but definitely worth doing that to give you the confidence and enable you to get the most from attending events, to have some of those realistic expectations, some goals there, think about the event itself and how you use the context. And I mean, I've talked about this in terms of those kind of business events, but clearly you'll be attending all kinds of events as kind of athletes, and maybe within your working environment too. So using the context of that event, considering your approach and how you approach people, and then a quick follow-up. So just making sure that you maintain that connection and that you do more with that connection. I'm going to move on to talk about LinkedIn. I'm conscious I'm nearly halfway through already. I don't know if people have got any questions or thoughts, or let me just move that here so I can see my chat function. But I don't know if people have got any thoughts they'd any questions. I'm going to have complete silence, aren't I now? Actually, I don't even know I can see my I can see my chat function. Has anybody got any questions or any thoughts on the in-person meeting of, I've put you all on the spot there really, haven't I? Go on, throw in a question.
Can you give an example of how you would do that polite exit? So say you've been talking to me and we've been talking about my role here and then you spot someone in the corner of your eye and you politely want to leave this conversation.
I love that.
A bit of role play.
That example, and actually it's really hard, but it is. It's almost like the over the top. It's been really lovely. Obviously, it has been lovely to talk to you. It's been really lovely to talk to you, and I hope that we can catch up again later. It's almost like a promise of something for the future, or I'll send you the whatever, or I won't forget to make the introduction to you. Lovely to meet you, and then a handshake or a closing of it does really help. We obviously can't do that on Zoom, but it's like a really positive. It's been so nice to meet you, and then it's the moving on. So I think it's almost not the drifting. Again, historically, I think I've done a bit more of that in the past. I just need to nip to the loo, and like people know that you're not really going to the loo or not really going to get a drink. So it's almost more insulting by doing that. So, but I think it's completely fine. If someone said to me, "Oh, thanks so much, it's been lovely to meet you," and maybe catch up with you later, and then they move off, I think I'm fine with that. I think it's probably the a little bit less subtle, it isn't really subtle, that makes you a bit more uncomfortable. It is. I have been on, there was another lovely WhatsApp group I was on, someone was like, oh, it's always with the boring person, it always gets stuck with the boring person. And the way I find it really hard, it's probably a bit about my own personality of being a people pleaser and not wanting to make people sad. I find it really hard when you're just with one person that's just the one person. That's the hardest part I find, is how do I walk away from a person when there's just the two of us in a conversation, because I feel like I'm just leaving them. Whereas if there's a few of us, I feel, I can go away, I can move away here, leave you to whatever. So that's the bit I do find hard, because it's almost like I've just said, I don't want to leave people on their own, and then I'm going to go and leave those people on their own. So I think probably there's a little bit about having a little bit of a tough skin for it. And practicing it definitely does get easier with practice. But yeah, it's a good question. So
the fear is that it comes across a little bit abrupt, but I guess, as you say, that's almost, if it was the roles were reversed, I would rather somebody just almost was really clear with me, rather than was like, oh, just go to the toilet.
Yeah, and I think, and I have also said to people in the past, oh, thank you, it's been really lovely to meet you. I'm just going to, find a colleague, or I'm going to wander around, because actually what you don't want to say to somebody is, you're a little bit, but if you were really interesting, I'd stay and talk to you for much longer. But actually, there must be more interesting people here. It's all like the subtitles of what you're saying. So, but I think it is. It's an acceptable way to do it, but it is about doing it clearly and doing it politely with a smile. Really helps. Smile helps all things. So yeah, but good. Thank you. And thank you for asking a question. That's lovely. Right, I'm going to move on to talk about LinkedIn, which is a bit more. Actually, I will ask you to use the chat function. Can people just let me know if you use LinkedIn now? So put yes, I do, and almost how active you are. So let us know if you've got, have you got LinkedIn profile, and two, how active are you on it? Let's have a look at that, because that'd be useful to know for I'm talking to a whole room of experts and you don't need advice at all. Let's see. Yes, I have it. Not very active, but observe. Oh, observers. Yes, that's interesting. Never use it. No profile. Oh, this is good. Okay. Yes, but not very active on it. Any others? So most of you have it, but you're not really using it. Excellent. Okay. And I guess, sorry, just another question then, if I can do, is why are you not really using it? Do you not feel it's a benefit? Do you not feel it's, do I need to almost explain why it would be a benefit, or is it just about time and what have you? I'm a lurker. We've got lots of lurkers. I think about 90% people are observing. There's only some that are sharing content. Yeah, so my next question is, why are you why do you think you don't really use it? Someone could put, I can't be asked. They haven't put that down there at all, actually. I just made that one up. Well, that's interesting. Okay. It feels a bit facing, just posting what people want to see. Yeah, so I don't feel like LinkedIn is like that, but that is really interesting that people would have that perception of it. I haven't prioritized yet. Yeah. Content to share. Yeah, that's very, I think lots of people feel that. It's almost like, just why would I go on just to look at other people's stuff? Don't know how to get the benefit. That's good, Martin. It's good that you're here. We can help with that. That's perfect. Lovely. Okay, so I've been on LinkedIn probably 15 years or so, since not long after it started actually, and I've gone through phases of really doing loads on it at the beginning and then not doing so much, and in the last 5 years or so I've got much more involved with it, and it has transformed my business and how I do business and the work that I do. And LinkedIn's definitely changed over that time too. So in the beginning, LinkedIn was literally you connected with people that you knew, that you trusted, and kind of built your connection that way. And it wasn't really about content. And it's changed over time. And now LinkedIn is a place that I'll go to with, and it always depends on who you're connected to, obviously, in terms of who's sharing what, but it's a great place to find out valuable information and to learn stuff that is of value, both in a business and life sense too. So I think the content sharing side of LinkedIn's dramatically changed recently, in the way in which it works and operates too. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to almost assume that you know the values of, and I'll talk to you about how you get the most from it. But it would be useful maybe if we talk at the end in terms of, if I haven't persuaded you as to why it is of value. So obviously there are many social media different platforms out there, and I feel like many of us have changed over time, and I do quite a lot on Instagram. I quite like Instagram. It's a nice place to be. People feel like they're kind on Instagram. I've always loved Twitter, but I find, especially in the last year or so, Twitter's getting more and more negative. It just seems like a place of negativity and hatred and vitriol, but it is where I used to go to learn stuff, and LinkedIn's almost a bit in between those places. I think I find things, it's great to have those connections and I'm learning stuff, but also it's great to have those interactions and those kind of opportunity to connect with people too. So the key steps I would say in terms of starting out and building your profile on LinkedIn, and as an athlete, whether you're, in the middle of being competitive now, or you're coming to the end of your career, or you are at the end of your career, I think LinkedIn is like this fantastic place. And there aren't that many athletes doing huge amounts on LinkedIn really well. There are some, but there aren't that many. And so you can stand apart. And being an athlete, you've got something quite different to others who are on LinkedIn in terms of a business sense. So the steps I would say is, one is creating a really strong profile. I'm going to give you some tips to do that from here, to go and connect and begin to build those connections with other people, sharing great content should you wish to. And you may not want to. And as I say, like a huge percentage of people across LinkedIn particularly, but across social media, just go to look at other people's content. They will never be sharing their stuff. But if you do, some ideas around that, and then how to engage and get better engagement, I say, with that community that you've built there. So one of the key things in terms of setting up your profile, and I haven't done this here, but I did do a session for the Women's Sport Collective where I knew who was on the thing, and I went off and looked at all their profiles in detail before I did the session. You'll be pleased to know I haven't done that for all of you. But one of the key things on your profile, I'd be interesting to know if you don't mind sharing in the chat. Do any of you have a LinkedIn profile where you haven't got either a photo or you haven't got an image on the banner at the back? So maybe put, yes to photo, but no to the banner image at the back. Just let me know what you've got, as I haven't been out stalking you. But one of the most important things, no banner image, got rid of me, no banner, lovely, okay. Oh, you're very good. You're all lovely and very obedient in responding. This is good, thank you. Oh, look at Katrina, she got both. That's brilliant to hear. But well done, Ben. That's good to hear. Okay, so some of you have got both, some of you got the photo, not the banner. But having a strong photo is so important, and updating the photo and making sure the photo looks like you and you're nicely in that picture too. Small things, but do make a difference to that first impression. So I have updated mine quite recently, but this is generally what mine looks like. So a nice banner with the name of the company and an image of me front and center there. And LinkedIn gives you this opportunity to put your just the photo that you have there, and people don't always do that. So they've got a photo in a distance, so they've got a very sometimes we see people on LinkedIn with very photo from a wedding, photo from a party, like not appropriate. business it doesn't need to be too appropriate, but something that doesn't look appropriate. So LinkedIn does give you the ability to adjust that photograph to make sure your face is front and center. So when someone's looking at it on a phone, they can actually see who you are. So these are some of the examples that I use on the Women's Sport Collective session that I did, where amazing women in sport, but these were their profiles. So yes, they've got photos, but we can't really see them on it because they're quite small, and they didn't have banners. Another 9 here too. So some with no photos, some with photos with different number of people in the photo, so we don't know which one is them. And the reason it's there is that we're helping. This is your first impression that you're having to someone that might want to connect with you, or might want to do business with you, or might want to sponsor you, or invite you on to talk on a program, or whatever they might want to do with you. This is their first impression, and that image is so important for the first impression. So here are my girly spots. I then went through and also looked at other women who were on the collective who did have lovely photos, front and center faces, and they'd use that banner to express something about them. So whether it was, so Edith there has a lovely charity, a running charity, but they use the banner to show what it was that they do. And as an athlete, it might be that you share, Sarah McQueen down on the left was working for Harlequins at the time, so it was a lovely picture of Twickenham Ground. It might be that it's something to do with the charity that you work with, but a picture that expresses, another lot here, Helen Mitchell-Walsh there as an athlete, showing the amazing Team GB back in 2016, winning gold. So something that shows who you are, a little bit about yourself. And if you haven't done the banner piece, actually Canva, I'm sure everybody uses Canva, don't they? And if they don't, I feel they should be, because it's wonderful, changed my life. But Canva has a lovely option where you can just choose a Canva image and it'll help you adjust it so it's exactly the right size, and then you can just download and share on LinkedIn. So really easy, but it does make a difference when you come across it to see those connections, and well done to those that have already got both. You've then got the chance to describe yourself, and again, you've got this 110 characters, you've got quite a lot of space. And it shouldn't just be your job title, or I'm an athlete, or I'm a what have you. It can be a bit more of a description, as people are finding it. And here's, we'll whiz on through, but here's where you can write that and edit that, and remember to keep updating that. And this was an example of where I looked at, you can obviously find connections on LinkedIn through other people's connections. So when I just scanned someone's connections, these were the connections that they had. So these are all second connections to me. But people in their descriptions just said, I'm the CEO and co-founder, or I'm the head of marketing. But of what? Unless they use that a little bit more. When I'm scanning that, I've got no idea what that person is, or why I would want to connect with them, or what might be of interest to me. So using those 110 characters to just describe yourself a little bit more can be really powerful. You've then also got an about section where you can do a little bit about yourself, and it doesn't need to be your biography, but again, as an athlete, you could, it could be so much more interesting than people that are in regular office jobs. But a bit about what you're looking to do, what you're looking to achieve, really telling your story. And you can, as I say, do that within the 2,000 characters that are there. You don't have to do these things, but the more complete your profile is, the more likely it's to be shared with other people on LinkedIn too. And then you have a little features section. So if you are posting, and some of you said that you're not really posting, but if you are sharing content, you can then pick 2 or 3 of the posts that you've shared to be featured. So when people come across your profile, they'll always see those key features, those key stories. I guess this is almost like tempting you in case you weren't thinking that you would like to do more on LinkedIn. But one of the reasons I really, really love LinkedIn versus other forms of social media like Twitter and others is that when you connect with somebody on LinkedIn, it isn't just that person that you're connecting with, you are then connecting with their network and their network's network. And that's a really, really powerful piece. So when I share something on LinkedIn, I share a story, I might share about my podcast or my book or what have you. If someone likes my post or they comment on my post, it then goes out and is showed to all of their connections. And if one of their connections then likes or comments on it, it's then shared in the timeline of all of their connections too. So it's this really powerful way to reach so many people really quickly, as you build your profile. So as I say, if on average, if you had, I think they say most people have around 100 connections, is it kind of average or so? But if you had 100 connections, so within your 100 connections, your first degree connections, they estimate that your second degree connections, all the people that are attached to them, would be around 10,000, and the third degree connections very quickly comes up to be nearly 1 million people. And you can actually test, it's quite fun if you've got nothing else to do on LinkedIn. But if you put a little asterisk in the search bar, if you put just a little asterisk in the top search bar, and maybe choose whether you want to look at this for people or for connections. I've done for connections to the second degree, so the people that I'm connected to and the people that they're connected to. So if you just put the asterisk in, it will tell you how many people they are. And for me, it says it's about 1.17 million people. So for me, that's extraordinary that actually through the connections that I have, and their then connections on, you almost kind of reach over 1 million people. So just that power to engage, you've got to believe that somebody in there's got, of interest and will help you in the future. So the powerfulness of those connections too. And getting started, again, if you haven't been on LinkedIn or you're just getting started on LinkedIn, how do you begin to build those connections? I would absolutely say start with friends and family, teammates, other athletes, and then if there's areas or you've done any work experience or there's people that begin to connect with them. And again, I keep coming back to this, but as athletes, you've got this added advantage that you are an athlete and you're competing, and you're not just a run-of-the-mill other person, that might happen in the future, just doing a job, but you're an athlete. So utilize that now as you can, to making those approaches and making those connections, connecting with your sponsors, other people that work for the organizations that you're linked to, sports organizations, agencies, etc. So just begin to think about who you might connect with, and that will soon build. Yes, that's a lovely question. I'm going to come back to that in just 1 second, Katerina. So getting some random people adding me, where's the line between adding them or not? And actually, I'm going to come on to that. I'm going to hold that because I do answer that in a second. So I would say, and again, it's about setting targets potentially, but if you're trying to add within a week, I'm going to try and add 30 connections this week, or just trying to think about having a bit of a target to build some of those connections as time goes by, trying to be natural as you add them. And I used to, when I connect with people, would do a bit of an introduction of hello, blah, blah, blah. I don't do that anymore. I just add a connection, and if they want to connect to me, they will, and if they don't, they don't. So I do less of the introducing myself as I connect to people, but it should be an enjoyable process to be connecting and engaging in that way. I'm going to come on to answer that question more, which is, should I connect with any random people that ask me to connect with them? And you do get them. I guess the more connections you get, the more random people you do get. I do connect with lots of people that I don't know, that I didn't in the past. I used to only be people that I knew really well, but I do now, unless I get a lot of people that approach me that are podcast. We can help you with your podcast, like the sales people. So those are the people that I don't connect to, or people that are in faraway places selling clothing or printing or whatever, or insurance, or people that I know are going to try and sell to me. So if this is me personally, if they're kind of within sport and they're within my the realms of, there would be some relevance, I generally will connect with them. If as soon as they connect with me, they then direct message me and try and sell me something, I just unconnect from them too, because I don't, it's almost like that. Don't overstep the mark, but it's not, I think I definitely say yes to those connections. Obviously, for the many women that are on this call, the Women's Sport Collective, it's a free network for women working in sport. That's a fantastic way to begin to start building those connections, because when I'm connected with everybody that's in the Women's Sport Collective, more or less, so if you're connected to me, you'll only be one away. You'll be like a second level connection with most of the people that are there, and that's a lovely way to start to build and build out those connections too. So yeah, I think that's changed for me over time in terms of, I do now definitely connect more than I do. So interesting. Perhaps more difficult for an athlete who doesn't have a clear path and know where they want to be in. Yeah, I would agree, to know if they want to connect. Yeah, but in that case, and I would say just connect with them. And if they get irritating, you can block them and unconnect with them. So I think it's almost like being more generous in your connections, because and also remembering that the people that you connect with, they're the people whose content you're going to see in your feed. So it's almost like, whose content do you want to see? Who do you want to be connected with too? So I mean, that's a trend for all social media, isn't it? Curating your following. The people that you follow, whether that's on Instagram or Twitter, are the people whose content you'll follow. So that's important too. But I think I would say be more generous. Don't be protective and say, I'm not going to connect with you because I don't know you really well. I would now say it's actually okay to connect. So if you do want to post, and actually posting is the way, because so few people do post, if you do post great stuff, that is the way that you will build connections. More people will find you and begin to see you as a credible person who can talk about X, Y, and Z. And it is really useful in the future in terms of looking for jobs, looking for sponsors, looking for opportunities. So I use a Bill Gates quote here, but content, it's like kind of what you share is going to be so important. And I know many people feel, I don't know what to share. I haven't got anything, what should I be showing in this place? What if I don't get any comments? What if I don't get any feedback? And I do know that that can be a concern for people. So it's almost like, how do you get started in that place? LinkedIn does say its mission is to give you content from the people you know, talking about the things you care about. So LinkedIn is quite clear of what it's trying to encourage people to do and to share. And over the time, and I'd say I've used LinkedIn a lot, and I do get quite good interaction and engagement on the content that I share. The editors, and I'm going to come on just talk in a moment about the algorithm, do tend to like content where people feel good, it makes people feel good, it's useful, it's helpful content, sensible advice, the heartwarming stuff. So that definitely does seem, and almost if you think about the stuff that you might engage with on social media, on LinkedIn, it tends to be the more positive stuff, sometimes calling things out, being a bit contentious, but it tends to be it's quite a positive place for content too. So I don't expect you to do all 9 of these, but I've just put a list there of some of the things that I found in terms of creating great posts. If you need a little bit of inspiration as to what you might begin to share, then definitely so these are the things that I share that I have success with. One of them is like an educational piece. If you've read a great book, you've seen a good documentary, you've watched a good film, that relates, it's slightly work related, but something of that kind. So even just sharing a link to it, sharing a comment to it can be powerful. Lots of posts around thanking other people, so recommendations, thanking people for activity. It can be controversial. We do see, calling people out, calling things out, as well as the celebration of things. Perhaps asking questions, and LinkedIn does, you can do polls on LinkedIn now. You see things kind of come in fashion and stuff. I've seen a lot of polls recently, which you might have done too. So it's almost like using them sparingly, but if you feel that's relevant. I said the positive inspirational piece, the positive news that you might see, celebrating things, definitely making recommendations, and useful content. So things that other people might find of use. And I would say it's almost like put a toe in the water and see. You might start by just reposting or resharing other people's content with your own conversation around that before you start posting your own stuff too. But I'm really happy from this to give any feedback or thoughts, or because I do know it can be hard to get started, but once you do and you begin to see the feedback and the interaction you get, it can be really, really powerful for building more of those connections and for you to be seen as an expert in that space. So there is a bit of not a secret to I have put secret, haven't I? But the LinkedIn algorithm, that when you share content, when you first share a post, LinkedIn assigns a quality score to the content. It doesn't really like you posting links that take people outside of LinkedIn. So when I share content, and I do share quite a lot, if I share we do a weekly newsletter roundup of great changes that are happening in women's sport, I'll share the post and then I'll go straight back in after, edit the post, and then I'll put in the links to, if I say, look at this, or read this book, or look at this documentary, I'll go back in and put the links in after, and then it creates a little LinkedIn shortened URL. So LinkedIn thinks it's not taking people outside of LinkedIn, it's just keeping them in there. And that's made a real difference to getting it shared with more people. So LinkedIn assigns, as I say, a quality score to it first of all. It then looks at the text and thinks, how does it relate to the audience that you have? So if you're sharing something that's completely nothing to do with the audience that you've got, and LinkedIn knows what those people like and have liked in the past, it will then push it out to a small sample of your following. So not everybody sees everything that's posted on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn will share that content with a small audience. And then if it's about this golden hour, the first hour, within that first hour, if people engage, and if you engage with them and comment back and forwards, if a test goes well, it'll push it out to many more people. And that keeps on happening. And I've definitely seen that with things where I've put something that might be controversial or something of interest, and you see it kind of takes off, and then all of a sudden it's seen by, 10,000, 20,000, 60,000. It really, really increases. And that's because LinkedIn pushes it further and further and further across those connections that you have. So it's interesting to see kind of how it works in terms of getting it started, but definitely that first hour of posting it and then beginning to engage with the people that have shared it or commented on it can be really, really powerful too. I guess just in close, I feel I've tried to condense 2 sessions into one here, but in terms of you're being engaged, if you're going to be on LinkedIn, then absolutely, LinkedIn used to be just you could like it or not like it, and now there is an opportunity to interact on more levels. If you comment and share, the first thing you want to do if you're not going to share content, but is begin to comment on other people's content. And that's really verifying for those that are sharing and taking the time to share stuff. But also it gets you out, it gets the people who are following you to see that you're engaging in content and begins to build those connections too. So even if you're not a person that wants to post, or you're a lurker, as someone said earlier, you're just there, absolutely, I would 100% recommend just liking and sharing and making comments on stuff, because I think that's so important for people. I'm conscious it's 7 minutes to 3 and I've talked a lot. So that's the end of the formal part of the presentation. But I would absolutely say to people, if you're interested in LinkedIn, definitely, if you're not already, but connect to me, link into me. Really happy to answer any questions or to look at your profiles and give feedback on that, or any thoughts on content and sharing. But I guess just in summary, I'm so passionate about the importance and the power of building a network, and I just feel for athletes and those coming into transition into the workplace, such a powerful opportunity for you to begin to invest in that now, that will just serve you massively in the future. I'm warning you, I'm going to stop sharing, so we'll see people's faces now. Lovely. So that's a bit of a whistle stop tour, but rather than chat, I don't know if anyone's got any comments or thoughts, or whether that's helped, or whether you're all going to rush away and create amazing LinkedIn profiles. But I'm not sure what people's thoughts are, whether that any questions at all.
So I've got a question, if that's okay, on you very briefly mentioned business cards at the start of the presentation, and I just wondered what your thoughts are on how we approach that type of thing moving forward. Do we use paper? Do we use digital? What's your thoughts?
It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, we could have a whole conversation about digital versus paper. I do feel, and I don't think there's, it's like we're going around full circle. We love ebooks, but I love books. There's something about paper and something that is the physical side of paper. So I do feel there's a bit of the sustainability, and we don't want to print too much and all those things. However, tiny business cards printed can have a huge impact, and almost it's a bit like the sending cards, that so few people do it now. It has much more of an impact. So there is something to be said, I think, and I definitely do, to having a business card. Not everybody still has them, not everybody wants them, but I think just giving, and also that's a little bit, we mentioned earlier, that whole how you finish a conversation and move on. Actually, can I give you a card? And that whole is another nice way to close that conversation. So I do feel, and I've seen some, I know the Germans love this a lot, but it's almost like putting the picture of you on on it too, which maybe as athletes, I know athletes often have cards that they'll sign, you know, with an image and so on as well. So something in between the two. But I do think it can be really a really valuable piece. And I mentioned Moo because I use Moo for print, but at Vistaprint, there's so many printing companies where you can just print 50, you know, nowadays you can print 50 lovely cards, you know, for not too much money. And I think for me, I think it's a really nice, something a little bit different to leave and pass to people. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
So I have a question. If I'm an athlete and I have a career outside my sport, should my LinkedIn profile be focused on kind of one or the other, or can I kind of combine those things?
That's a great question. I think because LinkedIn enables you, so it's interesting. I say, because I really struggle to describe what I am. Who am I? What do I do? So I'm a women's activist, I'm a podcast host, I'm an author, I'm a fearless woman CEO, I wear all different hats. So I think the fact that LinkedIn gives you that opportunity and all those numbers at the top, I would say elite athlete, what have you, and slash line, whatever you want to do, and whatever it is, I think it's fine to put both up there. So I do think I'm kind of seeing more and more of that, rather than being not just an athlete, because an athlete in itself is extraordinary, but I would use that to put both in, and it's just how you can lay that out to show that you're more than one thing. But I think that the fact that LinkedIn enables you to do that, yeah, absolutely, I would utilize that to be both those things. Good question. And I think also go and have a look around. So if you know other athletes that are on there, and there are, I could probably can have a look and share some of this with you too, but athletes that are doing it well, there are some Olympians, Paralympians, athletes that have done well at curating a presence on LinkedIn and sharing good content. So it's almost like always be looking and learning at what other people are doing and what you might learn to emulate from that too. And start with your own group, you know, it's almost that whole practice run, isn't it? But starting with your own group and building that, looking at what other people are doing and learning from that too. Any other questions at all? Did I answer all the questions that came in the chat?
I think so, yeah.
Lovely.
So I was just going to quickly ask about that in-person piece, and if you are in that situation where people are quite niche, how do you get yourself into that without stopping the conversation but also blending into it?
It's the hardest thing. I don't want to say that, and I do know it is even though I've done it for the longest time. I'm just trying to think of where I was even last week. It sounds very braggy. I was at the RFU, I was in an RFU event at the President's Suite for a lovely unveiling of an image the other week, and similarly, and people that I knew, I was in the room with people that I knew, and people were chatting, and I had gone off to talk to somebody, and then I came back in, and I had exactly that feeling of like, oh, I want to be here, but I don't want to stand around like a Billy no mates, but I want to be in the conversation, but I also don't want to interrupt your conversation because it looks like it's a really good conversation. I'm going to say I don't really have any advice. I think it is a really hard thing to do, so I think it is about practicing. I think it is about hovering. I think sometimes it is around looking around at who that other person might be that's feeling a bit like you, so maybe you're not going to be able to get into the conversation that you wanted. I do also talk to waiting staff, but and that's just a nice thing to do, to talk to people. There's still people that are there working at whatever, so sometimes I have found myself chatting to the person on the coffee stand, talking to the person who's exhibiting in a space too. So I think it's almost looking beyond those people that are there, or if not, just take your phone and pop to the loo. No, that wasn't really very good advice, was it really? But it is, I guess it's recognizing it is a really hard thing, and it's and I guess my thing, just going to come back to the next question, it is hard for everybody to do that. So I definitely think that turning yourself in and looking around and making sure you include other people, we can all help others in that space, because it is a hard space to be in. How do we get invited to network events or found about? That's really getting back those networking events, that's really true. Well, if you're a woman, join the Women's Sport Collective. Sorry, that's for the gentleman on the call. So I guess but getting invited to those events is the more that you do on LinkedIn, the more that you're connected, I imagine that you will be invited to more, and sometimes it is almost an event that's at the beginning or the end of a sports event or something of that kind. I imagine many of you will be speaking at those in the future too. Lovely. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Ben. That's lovely. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And please do, please do link into me, and I'm sure Katrina and the team will share my email address. Really, kind of really happy to build connections and to see how people are going and answering questions when I can. But thank you so much to everybody.
Thank you too. Yeah, slides will be shared, and I think your email address was on the end of that. And obviously LinkedIn might be a good place to start, and people can use you as a little practice.
That'd be really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. If anyone's got any other questions, please do feel free to hang around at the end and ask. But yeah, thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. My pleasure. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. I will stop recording and then I'll just hang on to chat with you.